Hi, my name is Julia Lambeth. I'm an educator at WSET School London, and in this video we're going to be looking at the red wines of the Left Bank of Bordeaux. The climate for Bordeaux is moderate and maritime, and there are a few natural factors that will have an influence here. The Gulf Stream has a warming influence. This will mean that there is less risk of frost in the spring and can also extend the growing season slightly. We can also find that there is a forest, the Landes forest, between the ocean and the vineyards, which can moderate the influence of some of the wind and the rain. And likewise, there are dunes, coastal dunes, which can also inhibit some of the weather. In addition, we can find, particularly in the vineyards of the Left Bank, there is a lot of gravel in the soils. The gravel will have the property of retaining some of the heat and then re-radiating that back to the vines, and will also help with draining the water from the rainfall. Next, we could look at some of the other factors that influence grape growing. With the maritime climate, we do get a fair amount of rainfall. This can be managed through the use of VSP training. This means that the vines are positioned with a canopy which is open to reduce the humidity and therefore the influence of fungal diseases. Fungal disease can have a negative impact on the grapes and means that the vines would have unpleasant flavours at the end of the growing season. Other ways to manage the fungal disease could be through use of sprays. Fungicides can help to reduce the impact of these problems on the grapes. What this can mean with the varying amounts of rainfall each year is that we can see different levels of ripeness in the grapes. This is sometimes known as vintage variation. And so what this means is that each year we will have a different level of ripeness in the grapes, and therefore that can impact the style of wine. Winemakers can use different blends or different winemaking options to help manage the vintage variation. In terms of the grape varieties we're looking at in the Left Bank of Bordeaux, our two key varieties are Cabernet Sauvignon and Merlot, and they can be blended with Cabernet Franc and Petit Verdot. Cabernet Sauvignon will often make up about 75% of the blend in some of the top wines of the region. Merlot can be used to soften the tannins and acidity of Cabernet Sauvignon, which can naturally be quite high. And then Cabernet Franc can be used to add a little bit more herbaceousness or more acidity, and Petit Verdot can be used to add some more black fruit or spicy characteristics to the wine. In terms of winemaking, there are a few different choices here too. When we're thinking about vessels for winemaking, some producers prefer to go with stainless steel vessels or concrete for fermentation, as here we can see less influence on the wine in terms of the flavour, and it is possible to manage the temperature of the fermentation, particularly with those stainless steel vessels. Some producers will prefer to use oak here instead, as with oak it can add to the flavour of the wine. Cap management will be another choice, in order to manage the amount of extraction that the wine is going to have. Here we're talking about extraction of colour, tannins and flavours of the skins. The more punch downs or pump overs that the winemaker does, the more extractive the fermentation is going to be. They can also use the temperature of the fermentation to manage the extraction. The warmer the fermentation is, the more of these things we're going to get in the final wine. Maturation is another option. With maturation here, we are typically talking about time spent in oak vessels. Many of these wines will have a fair amount of time in oak vessels to add more flavours such as vanilla, clove and cedar. And here we're typically talking about French oak vessels. The proportion of new oak can vary, and in some of the top wines they'd be looking at potentially 100% new oak, which will add a lot of flavour to the wine. Blending is another choice, and here we're talking about potentially blending the different grape varieties together. As I mentioned, in the Left Bank, we're often looking at a greater proportion of Cabernet Sauvignon, but the other grapes can be used in varying amounts according to the style of the wine the winemaker is looking to make. Next, we'll have a look at the different regions of the Left Bank. This can broadly be divided into the Medoc in the northern part of the Left Bank, and then Grape in the southern part. Within the Medoc, we have Medoc AC. Now this is one of the areas that actually has a little bit less gravel in the soil. where there is less gravel in the soil, it means it's less suited to Cabernet Sauvignon, as this is a thick-skinned variety which needs that extra heat from the gravel soils in order to help it ripen. So in the Medoc AC, we normally find more Merlot in the blend. This means wines that can have a little bit less tannin, a little bit less acidity, but can still have quite a lot of body and alcohol. As we move to the Haut Medoc, this is where we find more of that gravel in the soil, and this is where we can then ripen Cabernet Sauvignon successfully. So where Cabernet Sauvignon is the dominant grape variety in the blend, this will mean we have high tannin, high acidity, and wines with a concentrated blackcurrant flavour. With these wines, we will typically then expect some oak aging, which can add vanilla and clove flavours, and often some tertiary characteristics such as leather and earth. Within the Haut Medoc, we can also find some smaller commune appellations, such as Saint-Estèphe, Saint-Julien, Pauillac, Margaux, and these are where we often find some of the highest quality wines of the region, often with pronounced intensity, lots of complexity, and potential for long-term aging. In the Graves region, again, there are a couple of different appellations here. Pessac-Léognan is the appellation that we associate with some of the highest quality wines of the region. These will again often be Cabernet Sauvignon dominated, with the high tannin, high acidity and concentrated flavour that we would expect of Cabernet Sauvignon. Wines labelled Graves may have a little bit more Merlot in the blend instead. And again, these would therefore have a little bit less acid and tannin and maybe a little bit more body by comparison. Now, in addition to the appellations that we've just mentioned, there are some additional classifications that we can find on the left bank of Bordeaux. The first of these to mention is the 1855 classification. This is a classification that was done in 1855 and essentially ranked the top estates of the Medoc into different tiers. Wines that are part of this classification can feature the term Grand Cru Classé on the label. And this will then indicate to consumers that the wine that they're buying is part of that classification. Wines that were not included in the 1855 classification can apply to have a separate labelling term, and this is the term Cru Bourgeois. Wines that would like to apply for the Cru Bourgeois term can undergo a tasting test, and then if they are approved of as being good enough, the term Cru Bourgeois can be put onto the label. A little exam-style question to look at. So the question here is, why is Cabernet Sauvignon suited to growing on the left bank of Bordeaux? For 3 marks. To have a little look at the question here, our command verb is why. It's an explanation question. So for these types of questions, we normally want our answers to include words like because or therefore. So the answer here that you can see says Cabernet Sauvignon is a thick-skinned variety. This means that it will need more heat and sunshine to ripen compared to other varieties. Therefore, the gravel soils of the left bank, which retain heat, will help the grapes to ripen successfully. Thanks for watching.